Video games have never had the best stories, but the few games that actually do can be some of the most immersive ones to tell. When a game has amazing and relatable characters, a gripping plot, and even fun gameplay, it can make the entire game's story feel that much more impactful. But what can really make or break these moments is how it ends. An ending to a video game can be a lot more tricky than other forms of media, because games take hours to beat, so you want to build up to a great finale that will leave players satisfied. However, not every game's story is good, and a lot of games can have endings that leave a lot to be desired. Some can be so bad that they almost end up ruining the entire experience, because if there's one thing that people hate, it's wasting hours of their life just to get to this.
The dragon died with Kano. You're the last one, Jarek.
So I want to go over some of my own personal favorite bad endings, and why I think they're so disappointing. One of the strengths that video games have over other forms of media is its interactivity. This allows video games to essentially tell any type of story they want, and sometimes allowing the player to take control of the narrative. This is by far one of the best aspects of video games, since the player can essentially control the pace of the story being told, and even sometimes shape out its outcome. Not every game has this, but the few that do can be quite impactful. A game series that became famous because of this was Mass Effect, which was littered with player choice. You play as Commander Shepard, who goes on an intergalactic adventure to stop a universe-ending threat known as the Reapers, while recruiting fun weirdos along the way. This game series, at its best, allowed you to make multiple choices that could either make you the world's biggest suck-up or a renegade who doesn't play by the rules. It was a bit gimmicky, even back then, but it worked for the story they were going for. This formula was perfected in Mass Effect 2, however, where the entire game's story is setting you up to go on a side mission that can quite literally kill off all the main characters in the game, including you if you don't play the game correctly. It really heightened the game's story, making you that much more invested in not only your own survival, but the lives of the beloved characters that you grew attached to. But by far, the most unique gimmick was that the choices made in these games carried over to the next, allowing you to shape the entire series based on your own choices. It was really immersive, and there really hasn't been that many game series that has attempted something like this to this scale. But all this kind of fell apart by the final game in the trilogy, Mass Effect 3. Now, it's no secret that Mass Effect 3 is controversial, but what makes it so bad can best be summarized with its disappointing ending. To summarize, the Reapers have finally arrived, and it's up to you and your merry band of freaks to stop them by going on one final mission to recruit the entire galaxy against the final threat. This game isn't perfect, but its sense of scale cannot be denied. It really does feel climactic, since characters start dropping like flies, and there's this constant reminder of what will happen if you fail to succeed in your mission. It even makes you wonder if you can even beat the Reapers. But once you finally make it to the end, you are faced with one of the most difficult choices in video games. What color beam do you want at the end? That's right. After all the choices you have made in the previous games, all the great characters you have met, all the relationships you have built, and all the reporters you have punched, has meant absolutely nothing. You basically make a heroic sacrifice in order to save the universe, but in a way that feels unsatisfying and comes out of nowhere. Again, to make the story very short, you're basically given 3 choices that lead to the same ending with very little variation between them. Aside from the color of the beam, of course, we can't forget that. This is not even to mention that the ending only resolves one of the conflicts while leaving everything else to the wayside. This game doesn't even show you what happens after this, because you're only left with this ambiguous ending where one of the characters is shown to have survived in a remote planet, followed by a cryptic ending of a man talking about how much he likes space. It's very jarring. The fans, of course, handled this pretty well and asked the developers very politely if they could please change the ending, or else they will very politely burn down their office. This was a fascinating thing to experience because the entire fan base essentially had a meltdown overnight, many decrying the series as a whole and calling the ending one of the worst of all time. Some people smoked huge amounts of copium, however, saying that the ending was bad on purpose because the main character was hallucinating the whole time. Some even tried to sue EA, the publishers of the game, for false advertisement, stating that their choices didn't ultimately matter. It didn't work out, but the fact is that this game pissed a lot of fans off. The backlash was harsh, and the developers, BioWare, were defensive of the ending at first, but later had to issue an apology and promise that the ending will be expanded upon in the near future. Once the expansion finally released, It actually changed the ending enough, while also adding more scenes to help give the trilogy more closure than the original did. The developers even added a fan choice of dooming the universe by refusing to choose any of the 3 options, which is pretty funny. Not every fan was pleased, still calling the ending bad to this very day, but many were either satisfied or whelmed by the new ending at the very least. Still, it's fascinating how Mass Effect went from being a game series that many respected to one that almost seems to be forgotten. It didn't help that Andromeda was Andromeda, but hopefully the next game can bring the series back to greatness. Another game series famous for allowing players to make many choices is Fallout. Fallout 1 and 2 are seen as some of the most revolutionary games of all time. I haven't played them yet because I'm a fraud. Still, once the 3rd Fallout game was announced, many were excited to see how this game series was going to translate over to modern hardware. This game had massive shoes to fill, but luckily it was being developed by Bethesda.
It allows us to have 16 times the detail.
They made a lot of lofty promises, such as claiming that the story was going to be one of the best of all time, and how it was going to give players almost complete control in how the story plays out, with Todd Howard himself stating that there will be over 200 endings.
We're over 200 endings. That is not an exaggeration.
What a fucking liar, dude!
Once the game finally came out, however, players soon found out that the story wasn't exactly the best. I mean, it wasn't bad or anything, but it certainly wasn't good. Basically, your dad is Liam Neeson, and he really wants to purify the waters of the wasteland. So when he leaves your highly secured and safe vault for mysterious reasons, it's up to you to find them, until you get distracted and forget to complete the story. See, most people who play through this game either ignore the story outright to do their own thing, or complete the story up to a point for a very valid reason. Remember those 200 endings that were promised? Well, that was a small giant lie, because the ending was more like 3 variations of the same outcome. Either you sacrifice yourself to purify the waters of the wasteland, or you send your buddy to sacrifice themselves. Oh, and Liam Neeson dies halfway through, so that's why he couldn't do it. Spoilers by the way. But what really makes this ending one of the worst was not the stupid plot contrivance of forcing you to sacrifice yourself or die regardless if you send your buddy in, but the fact that the game ends and starts you from the very beginning. If you poured hours into this game, building your character to be as strong as possible, you would still be forced to reset the game regardless. Unless of course you made an earlier save before the point of no return. This naturally made fans very unhappy with the ending, and Bethesda knew this, because they would later go on to make a DLC expansion that allowed you to go past the ending. But I can already hear you say, doesn't New Vegas end after you beat the final mission as well? Which is true, but unlike Fallout 3, the ending is actually satisfying and has more variations, and is also fun to replay, so it isn't that big of a deal to restart. Besides the ending, I still do enjoy this game, but everybody knows that the ending for Fallout 3 was bad. Let's just hope that the ending for Fallout 4 was better. Speaking of replaying games, game remakes and remasters are something that only video games seem to provide. Basically, they take an older game and remake it from the ground up, giving it new visuals while trying to stay as true to the original as they possibly can. Emphasis on the trying. Sometimes the remake can be the definitive way to experience these games, while other times they can be the most inferior versions. A game that I think perfectly fits this is Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but the game that I want to talk about is Pokemon Let's Go. Pokemon are known for remaking their older games, but this game was a huge departure because rather than add stuff, they stripped a lot of things away, as well as changing the gameplay to better fit with Pokemon Go. This game is disappointing for a multitude of reasons, but I want to focus on the game's story. Pokemon has never had the best stories, but Pokemon Red and Blue worked because it was so simple. Basically, you're a Pokemon trainer who sets out to take on the Pokemon Gym Challenge and become the Pokemon champion. But then you have your rival, who not only relentlessly antagonizes you, but is always one step ahead of you. They're basically a huge brat, and it motivates you to try and beat him, what makes it that much more perfect when you finally beat the Elite Four, saying that you would have become the Pokemon champion had it not been for your rival who had just beaten them and become the champion before you did. This was a simple but effective narrative choice, because you have your final battle with your rival, and you promptly beat them one last time before you are officially crowned the champion of the region. Again, it's not complicated at all, but it works for this type of story. But where Pokemon Let's Go, a direct remake of Red and Blue, fails is that it makes your rival friendly. All the motivation for beating your dickhead rival is gone in favor of this twerp who has even less personality than your original rival did. Not only is he friendly, but he helps you throughout your journey rather than actually being a challenge you look forward to facing. But what I think is the icing on the cake is how this guy also somehow becomes champion simply because he asks you if he could go ahead of you before you do. It just steps away all the interesting stuff away in an already bare bones plot of Pokemon, in favor of having this completely unsatisfying ending of facing your friendly rival as champion. It just goes to show you how a simple change can really ruin a lot of the experience of a game, which is why Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is the worst Pokemon game, while Let's Go is not too far behind. The final game series that I want to talk about is everyone's favorite, Call of Duty. Call of Duty is one of the most Djangoistic, balls to the walls, 420 smoking, Mountain Dew drinking, Dorito eating, stupidest games of all time, and I enjoy playing them. But basically, the story is how America is so cool and we have to beat the bad guys who are uncool and evil. That's it, that's pretty much the plot of all these games. But some of these games can actually tell us pretty decent story from time to time, with the Black Ops series having some of the better stories in Call of Duty. The Black Ops series usually deal with higher concepts such as espionage, the Cold War, and mindfucks. In the first game, it's revealed that the main character was a sleeper agent the whole time, and you were brainwashed by the Russians to maybe assassinate the president. In the second game, you play in the future trying to stop the bad guy from destroying all technology, while learning how in the past, you accidentally created the bad guy, and also giving you many different endings depending on what choices you have made. In the third game, point being, the stories in these games have always been a highlight for many fans for actually attempting to tell a story. We don't talk about Black Ops 4 though. So when Black Ops Cold War was announced, many people were excited with what new weird story they were going to tell, but I think it has one of the more disappointing endings in the entire series. You play as a character named Bell, who is tasked with stopping the Soviet Union from detonating secret nukes that were left all over Europe by America in case the Soviets ever invaded. It's your standard Call of Duty affair, where you go around the world and shoot the bad guys, but the highlight is when it's revealed that you aren't playing as Bell, but rather a Soviet soldier who was brainwashed by the Americans in order to help them stop the nukes from going off. It's actually a really trippy sequence where you go into your mind and fight the brainwashing process to find out what's really going on. The game then ends by having you betray the people who brainwashed you, and then setting off the nukes anyway, letting America take the fall? Wait a minute, this ending's awesome. Why is this so disappointing? Well, this ending is non-canon, meaning it actually doesn't happen. The true ending is where you team up with the Americans and you beat the bad guys despite the fact that they brainwashed you and used you the entire game? But it's okay because you then have a standoff with the guy who brainwashed you before cutting to black? That's it? So this ending was pretty lame, especially with all the amazing build-up. Having this entire setup just to boil down to a standard Call of Duty affair where nothing happens is what makes this game ending suck that much more. Still, it's one of the more memorable Call of Duty stories simply because of how weird it gets. At least it wasn't Call of Duty Ghosts. That game ended on a shitty cliffhanger that still hasn't been resolved in 10 years. Many games have horrible endings over the years. That's it, that's the ending of the video.